So really excited about this program today and this topic, and some of our team members in the county are very excited about this particular topic because we're trying to lead by example, for example, through our food systems initiative and our in trying to coordinate the decarbonization framework with the larger river park and conservation. So these are ideas that some of us are trying to gather and see what it is we can do at the county as well. So with that, I want to hear that there are many stakeholders and experts, and some of you have already heard this new approach, our knowledge that we want to seek from around the country and the world. The format of this workshop is where we flip the role such that the stakeholders present and the government listens, is a pilot of our own. So I hope that you will come along with us in this journey to explore these new ways of public outreach. If this is successful, we will be building an online repository of ideas on Ideas Bank with 5 to 7 minute presentations followed by questions from the moderator that will be me today. So with that, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Marina Kalunia. Dr. Kalunia graduated with honors in microbiology from the Dnipro National University in Ukraine. She is a professor of microbiology and lead of the C1 Biocatalysis Laboratory in the Department of Biology at the San Diego State University. Her unique expertise includes microbial genomics and physiology, systems biology, and metabolic engineering of microbes that consume single carbon compounds such as methane and methanol. Dr. Kalunia's research efforts include the development of novel sustainable approaches for capturing greenhouse gas emissions and conversion into value-added products. She's also the author of more than 100 scientific publications, book chapters, and numerous patents related to microbial methane conversion. So thank you. We're really honored to have you here to hear your ideas, Dr. Kalunia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It is my great pleasure. And thank you for wonderful introduction, Michael and Murtaza. It's really great to be here and talk about what I envision as C1 Biotech, which is a very blooming area at the moment. And I'm having opportunity to discuss what also was for at least 20 years of my main topic of research. I like to bring two images on my first slide, and those two images, it's microbes, and as a best solution to deal with what we know one of the biggest struggle of our current climate problems is methane. And I would love to emphasize one more time that we all know now that methane is 84 times more potent than CO2 when we look at 20 years time frame, and we don't have more than 20 years to deal with climate change at the moment. Next slide, please. Why we wonder about methane, why we should think about methane. Methane, we all know, is a very powerful greenhouse gas. Here on the graph, which I put together from ITC report prepared for Paris Congress quite a few years now, you can see red and blue. And this red and blue represent contribution of CO2 and methane to climate change. And 45 means that significant portion of this impact comes from methane. Even so, methane is relatively small in concentration in the environment, in our atmosphere. This contribution seems to be the one of the most significant one. This is why, if we look forward, what we can do to deal with climate change now, how we can terminate and expand time for ecosystems to adapt, methane becoming this essential target number one. And you might see it on many news, which like the lowest hanging fruits that comes from European Union. One of the most effective things we can do to reduce near-term global warming. That's every time when we talk about it, that comes back to the simple molecule, which is methane. However, when we will look where those molecules come from, significant portion of it comes from our fuel recovery energy. But if we will look down on the graphs, that would be animal husbandry, agriculture, biomass burning, waste and landfills, which contribute humongously to methane emissions. And all those contributions comes from biology, comes from microbes which produce methane. And that, as a microbiologist, that clearly tells me we disturb our ecosystem in a such way that we give advantage to some microbes to produce methane. And at the same time, we left behind microbes which consume those in nature. Next slide, please. And it's just an example. We all know that cattle is one of the biggest challenge in methane emissions. In US, livestock include 94.4 million of cattle. And I did very simple calculation. Each cow will produce about 200 to 500 liters of methane per day. If we will count for all population of cattle, that would be about 1,166 million cubic feet per day. How big it is? This is all residents of California, amount of methane residents of California consumed per day as natural gas. It's exactly the same amount. Can you imagine whatever you use today as a natural gas, you just open and release it to atmosphere. If you look on Delaware, the population of Delaware will use the same amount of methane per month. The input is indeed really big one. Can we go to next slide, please? So now we know that US pledged early this year to reduce methane emission with the biggest initiative pledge 30 by 2030. This pledge was supported by European Union and more than 100 countries around the globe. But the biggest question is how we can do it. And it goes in many different directions. Of course, we have to reduce venting and flaring. This is from energy recovery. We have to tighten nuts and bolts, and engineers contribute incredibly well to this part. This is your natural gas delivery pipelines, how we can make them more sustainable, less leaks. And of course, when my expertise come along, how we can apply biology. We know that in nature, microbes consume methane, and we kind of ignore them in our ecosystem. But now how we can restore the balance by bringing those microbes back, and in many of our industries, from fossil infrastructure, livestock, in agriculture. Next slide, please. And I work with microbes which are methane consuming. This is my passion, this is my area of research, and people often ask where you can find them. And I like to say everywhere in nature. Just look around, you grab soil, and you will see methanotrophic bacteria there. We know that methane-consuming microbes are incredibly beneficial for animals and plants. We also know that they are well established as animal feed. At this moment, we can say that there are two big, large-scale biotech companies, one in European Union, Unibio, and another one in US, Calista, build those technology to produce single-cell protein as animal feed. They are excellent sort of protein, and they're known to be at the large-scale fermentation, and proven to work on the large-scale fermentation. Can we go to next slide, please? And that basically gives me an opportunity to discuss, when I was encouraged to think about the solutions, that we can bring those microbes back into our everyday life in three different areas. And I'd like to highlight all those three areas. One of them is capturing, another one is conversion, when feedstock is methane is significantly large, and preserving. And I will go over all of those solutions in the moment. Next slide, please. One solution, and this is when we think about cattle, what can be done at simple animal farm? You have animal farm, you have a pollution which is manure. This manure, we have to treat it as anaerobic. Best waste will be anaerobic digester, which produces biogas as a source of methane. If we will bring microbial fermentation here to recapture this methane, to produce feed, which I just mentioned to you is very well established feed for animals, it can be utilized on the same farm. This is a wonderful, in my opinion, example of completely circular ecosystem, which on an animal farm can bring those emissions down, which currently contribute significantly to overall climate change. Next slide, please. With the second one, I'm kind of taking you even further. If we will look on methane, what can be done out of it? And I like to think, and I encourage my colleagues also to think about methane as a wonderful feedstock. We used to use sugars, we used to use agriculture as a feedstock to produce fuel. We can go beyond that. We can take waste and waste producing and waste sources as a waste treatment, water pollution, water treatment is another example. Was all produced biogas, significant source of methane. This biogas can go to the system. You can look at it as what we call it as a bioreactor, to produce a number of wonderful molecules out. And I just given you an example. My team was able to work out, cooperate with different companies, our other colleagues at San Diego State University. For example, production of single-use packaging, our polymers, our plastic, our production of fibers and coating, also as a focusing on more sophisticated nanotech sensors for electronics. All of them, again, not only close the cycle in our systems, they also utilize what we emit in the environment at the moment. We can couple it with renewable energy to reconvert even CO2 that comes out from microbial respiration back into system, back to the production of final product, making everything more sustainable. Can you go next slide, please? And I just an example, this is something that I summarized from my slide, from my lab research. We know that we can produce many different compounds. We can produce polymers, which PHA already mentioned to you. We can produce sugars. We can produce isoprene meconic acid, all of which can also go into production of new generation plastics. We can produce enzymes. Just slightly looking on what we do today from different sources, reconverting it to utilization of what is greenhouse gas emissions at the moment. And on my left side of the slide, I also show you that we can use those microbes to capture methane from environment. And my student developed that as a system, leaf system, which, as I show you, can be stable, as simple and stable for about 6 months. We didn't measure after that, it continued to be simple, stable after that, but it's even consumed methane from the environment, bringing a completely new way how we can mitigate methane in atmosphere. Next slide, please. I also want to bring one solution which I think absolutely incredible. We live in an arid ecosystem. And what is arid ecosystem? If we move forward, we talk about land use, and this topic is about land use as well. But as we convert arid ecosystem to agricultural, there is some very important impacts. Arid land is a splendid sink for methane. As we move it to agriculture, it's becoming a source of methane emissions, which very important to remember. One student in my lab found incredible, wonderful phenomena in Anza Borrega Desert near us, in which we know that microbes in desert stimulate plant growth. They reduce requirements for water and at the same time stimulate methane production. We call it as an iSafe as microbial supplement, which we believe will be critical to implementing for arid crop production pipeline in near future, not only to improve production of crop at low water in drought environment where we live, but also to enhance methane consumption, bringing this natural capability of soil to breathe methane out from atmosphere. Next slide, please. And I want to mention that, of course, our vision goes beyond. I'm incredibly fortunate to have wonderful colleagues at San Diego State University, which takes this idea of taking waste, making simple molecule out of it as the most easy recyclable solution, and united with biofermentation to build completely new array of products which we currently produce from fossil fuel. And of course, with that, it will be my last slide. I would like to thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll just say Marina.
Yes, yeah, Kaluzhna, I know that it's a very difficult name, but you did incredibly well on pronouncing it. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kaluzhnia. So I wanted to just emphasize the importance of reducing methane because of its, especially in the short term, significant impact in getting climate change under control, and also the United States, as part of 30 countries in last COP, Climate of Parties, pledged to reduce methane by 30% by 2030. Now, we know that's not enough, but nonetheless, taking methane in control is significantly important for keeping the temperature under control. So with that kind of importance of methane, really appreciate you giving this kind of perspective. Could you highlight specific ideas? Like, we're trying to, there are many practitioners here, agencies on our calls, and they would like to see if there's any ideas or suggestions we can take home for action for this in terms of this methane.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe there are two things which I wanted to highlight today, and it came out when we discuss ideas for a new startup company, especially around dairy farm, in form of how we can embed, how we can implement methane utilization, where methane is produced. And surprisingly, I heard something that for me, for scientists, was like somewhat more challenging. I thought that people like open, let's make our environment much better, but I know that it's more idealistic way of thinking about everything. One concern which was raised is, you know what, the farmer will not take your technology because it might add additional cost. And I figure out that we do have gaps. We do have significant gaps in communication between people who produce our milk and people who develop and think about ecosystem and environment. And I'm not saying those people, bad people, are those people, the very naive people and do not communicate. But I believe what you do, guys, is incredible to uniting, to bringing and discussing and making sure that people can connect and can see potential and maybe be open for new initiatives which might come out from novel biotechnologies. And this is where I think the county might contribute more. I love to go to Department of Energy workshops, and what they typically like to do, they like to bring farmers to discuss and talk directly to scientists, and then those farmers becoming people who transform this idea and talk to their peers, delivering new initiatives directly to the field. And I know that farmer will listen farmer much better. And I think that I would love to see that happening as well. I would love to talk to people, and I would love to see some of those technologies moving forward, even as a trials, to be embedded, to be more acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I wanted to just talk about gaps. You mentioned gaps, but in terms of gaps in our knowledge, particularly, I'll just give you an example. And our project is called decarbonization. And when we did our modeling, it was focused on carbon dioxide, right? So it's not focused on carbon per se. And part of the problem is, I think, the lack of ability to inventory methane. So I just want to step back in terms of big picture. What are the gaps of knowledge, and what are the ways we can learn from what your research shows?
I would say we do have wonderful baseline knowledge about how we can grow microbes in the lab. We also have a relatively well-established technology to use large-scale methane sources. However, when we think about farms, we need to come up with a solution which is between, which is simple, acceptable, and at the same very easy to implement. And if you will ask me today where I will put my money, I would love to dedicate my research. I would love to sit down with great engineers and build a very simple system which people can take and embed directly at their farm, if it can be embedded directly at wastewater treatment, small-scale wastewater treatment, something that needs to be simple. This is one of the biggest challenge across this area at the moment. The second biggest challenge is also, can we build technology which can stimulate methane consumption from environment? Yeah, that's, people think about it. There are different ways how people discuss about it. Is it possible? Can be it done? And again, there are several initiatives which never went beyond the lab scale at some point. It would be nice to see bigger implementation for that. And I would love to see this gap also filled up and kind of feeling requirement to mitigate not only CO2, but requirement to mitigate methane emissions. And very often maybe not only at point sources, even point sources may be more significant. And this is where we should target first, but also just let's reduce them. And this is where our iSafe came along very well, I believe, initiative, because what can be simpler than coat your seeds with microbes, which we know we deplete from agriculture now, and bring them back to the environment. I would love to see those field trials to move forward. And if anyone will like to support it, would be a wonderful opportunity to explore how really it can help in the environment. We'd have wonderful outcomes in the lab settings, but I would love to see them in the field. That another transition that should happen, in my opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Kurz. I was in terms of your the when you talked about the field, it was primarily presentation was focused on agriculture, and I wanted you to if you could touch a little bit on the picture there about landfills. We have several, like some that are active and some that are retired landfills that are continuously emitting methane. And how do we kind of, in terms of the circular economy, how do you see that maybe as a county we could play a role in bringing everybody to the table to do something about the methane that is being emitted from our landfill in a way that decarbonizes our region as well?
Wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up. First of all, I would like to compliment what county does already. I was in touch with Miramar landfill facility, and I really was impressed that they're already capturing significant portion of methane and utilize it to drive trucks, which is wonderful compliment. Of course, there is still additional methane emission that still continue to comes out. There is a significant, absolutely incredible research which is done in this area, including to embed microbes to cover the surface layer to consume methane emissions further. I'm not sure it's done. I'm not sure even if the research is done in that particular area in our fields, but you bring up very interesting point as well. Yes, that needs to be also explored, because again, if you will look on the map of San Diego State and look on San Diego County and look where emissions are, you will immediately see pipelines and landfills. This is what comes out. I would only say, would love to see more initiatives coming out in support of mitigating methane at a smaller scale. And of course, bringing seeds with plants there might be benefit as well too. So
thank you. That is amazing. Thank you, Dr. Kalnia, for that. If your team thinks of or wants to partner on a demonstration project on methane in landfill, please feel free to reach out. We want to partner.
Would love to. Absolutely. Yes, we would love to. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. So next we will hear